Let's talk about something that sounds like a good problem to have: a guaranteed paycheck for life. No market risk, no wondering if you'll outlive your savings. For most Americans, that's a fantasy. For you, it might be reality. But here's the tension that nobody warns you about. That pension check, as reliable as it feels, can quietly set off a chain reaction of tax spikes, Medicare surcharges, and lost compounding that erases more wealth than a bear market ever could. I'm Sophia, and this is not a video about how lucky you are to have a pension. You already know that. This is about why the standard retirement playbook, the one built for people with only a 401k and Social Security, actually breaks when you add a third leg to the stool. We're going to walk through the 4 hidden fault lines in pension planning. And more importantly, what you can do about them starting today, even if retirement still feels 5 years away. Let's start with a reality check about where most Americans actually stand. Roughly 85% of the workforce is heading into their later years with 2 income sources: a 401k they hope they saved enough into, and Social Security they hope won't get cut. That's it. That's the entire plan for the vast majority. So if you have a pension, you are in rare company. You have a floor, a base level of guaranteed income that doesn't care what the Federal Reserve does with interest rates or how the S&P 500 performed last quarter. That's powerful. But here's the counterintuitive insight. More income sources don't make retirement simpler. They make it more complex, because each source interacts with the tax code, with Medicare, and with inflation in ways that none of them would create on their own. Think of it like a 3-legged stool where each leg is made of a different material: wood, steel, and glass. They all hold you up individually, but put them together, and they start to stress each other in unexpected ways. That's the situation you're in. And the advice flooding YouTube right now, the stuff about safe withdrawal rates and bond ladders, was built for the person with only 2 legs. You need a different blueprint. So let's walk through the first trap, the one hiding in a 30-page HR packet that's about to land on your desk about 5 years before you retire. Picture this. You're in your late 50s or early 60s. One afternoon, someone from HR slides a folder across the table. 30 pages of legal language, small print, and 2 big numbers on the first page. Option A: a lump sum of $500,000 deposited directly into your account. Option B: $3,500 per month every month for the rest of your life. They give you 30 days to decide. Most people stare at that lump sum and feel something. It looks like a reward, a validation of 25 years of showing up. But that feeling is exactly what the math was designed to produce. Because that offer wasn't built for you. It was built by actuaries whose job is to calculate what your life expectancy is worth and then price the lump sum just low enough to save the company money. Here's what's actually happening behind the scenes. The company is trying to transfer risk off their balance sheet and onto yours. Longevity risk, market risk, inflation risk, all of it. They're not doing you a favor. They're offloading a liability, and the key variable that determines whether that lump sum is fair is buried in the fine print toward the back of the packet. It's called the discount rate. When interest rates are high, companies can justify a lower lump sum because they assume they could invest that money and earn a decent return. When rates drop, the math shifts the other way. But by the time most people figure out how to find that number, the 30 days are already gone. Let's run the numbers on that $500,000 offer versus the $3,500 monthly payment. If you live 12 years past retirement, the monthly payout totals $504,000. You've already broken even. Every month after year 12 is pure gain that the lump sum can never recover, no matter how well you invest it. If you make it to 85, the monthly track pays out over $840,000. The lump sum is still sitting at $500,000, minus whatever the market did to it along the way. Now, the lump sum isn't automatically wrong. If you have serious health concerns, if your family history suggests a shorter lifespan, if you have the discipline to invest that money and leave it alone, it might be the right call. And it does give you something the monthly check never will: an asset you can leave to your kids. That's the real trade-off. Monthly income buys you security and longevity protection. The lump sum buys you control and an inheritance. You're not choosing between good and bad. You're choosing which kind of risk you'd rather hold. The company already made their choice when they built that offer. Now you get to make yours. But you can't make it without asking one simple question: what discount rate did you use? HR is required to tell you. Ask for it in writing. Now let's move to the second trap. The one that doesn't show up in year 1 of retirement, it shows up around year 15. Your pension is almost certainly a fixed number. Most plans do not include a full cost of living adjustment, and the ones that do typically cap it around 2%. That sounds reasonable until you look at what healthcare actually costs as you get older. Medical inflation has consistently run above 2% for years. Prescriptions, specialist visits, procedures that weren't on your radar at 62 become major line items by 75. The Social Security Administration recently confirmed a COLA of 2.8% for 2026. That's better than some years. But it's still a ceiling, and your actual spending doesn't care about ceilings. Run the math on a $50,000 annual pension with no COLA. After 20 years, that same check buys roughly half of what it bought on day one. The number on the deposit doesn't change, but what it can pay for quietly shrinks every single year without anyone sending you a notice. The early years of retirement are often the healthiest and most active. You're traveling, you're spending, the income feels more than enough. That's the part people plan for. What's harder to plan for is the stretch from 80 onward, when healthcare costs climb, when you might need help at home, when the fixed check that felt generous at 65 starts to feel tight. This isn't a reason to panic about having a pension. It's a reason to be clear-eyed about what the pension actually covers and what it doesn't. A fixed income floor is a powerful thing, but a floor isn't a full plan. This brings us to a counterintuitive shift in how you should think about your 401k. Most people treat their retirement account as a backup emergency fund, something conservative they'll barely touch. But that instinct leaves the one asset that can actually fight inflation sitting on the sidelines. Your 401k can do something your pension never will. It can compound. It can grow faster than inflation. And if invested with a long enough horizon, it can quietly offset the purchasing power your fixed income loses each year. Here's the reframe. You don't have a pension and a retirement account. You have a stable floor and an inflation engine. The question is whether you're actually using the engine, because your pension is already doing the job of bonds. It's stable. It's guaranteed. It shows up every month regardless of market conditions. That's exactly what the fixed income portion of a traditional portfolio is supposed to do, which means your 401k doesn't need to be conservative. It doesn't need to hedge against volatility the way it would if you had no guaranteed income underneath it. You can afford to let it run. Not recklessly, but with more equity exposure than the standard age-based formula would suggest. One protects you. The other grows for you. They're doing different jobs. Most people with pensions never make this distinction. They manage the 401k as if the pension doesn't exist and end up with a portfolio that's too conservative to outpace the inflation that's quietly eating their fixed income. Now, let's talk about the trap that hurts the most because it feels like a punishment for doing everything right. I've watched someone go through this, retired at 64. Pension coming in, Social Security starting up, a 401k they'd been adding to for 30 years. By every measure, they did everything right. Saved consistently, never touched retirement accounts early, lived within their means. At 73, they got a letter from Medicare, not a bill they were expecting. A surcharge. An additional charge tacked onto their Part B premium because their income, as the IRS calculated it, had crossed a threshold they didn't know existed. They hadn't gotten a raise. They hadn't sold anything. What happened was simpler and more frustrating than that. The IRS required them to start withdrawing from their 401k. And that withdrawal, stacked on top of the pension and Social Security, pushed their total income past the line. They did nothing wrong. That's what made it so hard to absorb. This is what the IRS calls required minimum distributions, or RMDs. Starting at age 73, the government requires you to pull a certain amount out of pre-tax retirement accounts every year, whether you need the money or not. The formula is based on your account balance and your life expectancy. The bigger the account, the bigger the forced withdrawal. For most people, that's a manageable inconvenience. For someone with a pension, it can be a serious problem. Here's why. Your pension already creates an income floor, add Social Security on top of that, and you're already at a solid number before you touch the 401k at all. Then the RMD kicks in and forces additional taxable income into the picture. Suddenly, your modified adjusted gross income, your MAGI, is climbing past thresholds you never anticipated because you never needed that money in the first place. In 2026, the standard Medicare Part B premium is about $200 per month. That's the baseline. But once your MAGI crosses $109,000 as a single filer or $218,000 as a married couple, something called IRmaa kicks in, income-related monthly adjustment amount. It's a surcharge layered on top of your regular premium. And it can run anywhere from a few hundred to several $1,000s extra per year per person. The cruel part is the 2-year look back. Medicare uses your tax return from 2 years prior to set your premium. So the RMD that pushed you over the line in 2024 shows up as a higher Medicare bill in 2026. By the time you see the impact, the decision that caused it is already in the past. The people who get hurt worst aren't the ones who overspent or made risky investments. They're the careful ones. The people who maxed their contributions every year, who were proud of the balance they'd built, who thought a bigger 401k meant more security. Nobody told them that a large pre-tax account, combined with a pension income floor, could eventually turn their own savings into a tax liability. You spent decades doing exactly what the system told you to do. And the system penalizes you for it on the other end. Let me give you a real-world example to make this concrete. A couple with a $60,000 pension, $40,000 in combined Social Security, and a 401k large enough to trigger a $30,000 RMD is suddenly looking at $130,000 in gross income, well past the IRMAA threshold. Their Medicare costs go up, their effective tax rate goes up. And the 401k they saved so carefully is now generating a tax bill every year, whether they spend the money or not. The better saver you were, the harder this hits. That's the trap. But here's the good news. And there is good news. This is one of the most solvable problems in retirement planning if you catch it early enough. 5 years of runway is enough to make a real difference. The solution is called a Roth conversion, and it's the most underused tool in the entire tax code for people with pensions. Here's how it works. Right now, between today and the day you retire, your taxable income is probably at its peak. But the moment you stop working, there's often a gap. A few years before Social Security starts, before RMDs kick in, a window where your income drops and your tax bracket drops with it. That window is one of the most valuable opportunities in financial planning. Use it to convert portions of your pre-tax 401k into a Roth IRA. You pay taxes on the conversion now at a lower rate. Everything that goes into the Roth grows tax-free and comes out tax-free. No RMDs, no IRMAA exposure from those dollars, no tax bill on the growth. The target in 2026 is to keep your annual Roth conversion amount calibrated so your total MAGI stays below $218,000 for a married couple or $109,000 as a single filer. Stay under those thresholds and you avoid the IRMAA surcharge entirely. Cross them and you're paying more for Medicare on top of the conversion tax. The math here is deliberate. You're choosing to pay a smaller tax bill today to permanently eliminate a larger one later. The 401k you convert stops being an RMD liability. It stops being an IRMAA trigger. And for the surviving spouse, it stops being the thing that pushes them into a punishing tax bracket after everything else has already gotten harder. That last point about the surviving spouse is where this gets really important. Most retirement planning stops at the couple. You run the numbers together. You plan the income together. You stress test the budget together. And when everything adds up, there's a real sense of relief. The pension covers the basics. Social Security fills the gap. The 401k sits in reserve. It works. What most plans don't model clearly enough is the day it stops being a two-person household. When one spouse passes, the surviving partner doesn't just lose a companion, they lose an income stream. The smaller of the two Social Security checks disappears. Gone. The household goes from 2 sources of guaranteed income down to 1, almost overnight. That alone is painful. But what compounds it is the tax filing status change. As a married couple filing jointly in 2026, your standard deduction is over $32,000. The moment one spouse dies, that number gets cut in half. The surviving spouse files as single, the deduction drops. The tax brackets compress. The same income that was taxed at one rate inside a joint return is now taxed harder inside a single return. And IRMAA follows the same logic. The threshold that protected you as a couple, $218,000 in MAGI, drops immediately to $109,000 for a single filer. The pension didn't shrink, the RMDs didn't stop, but suddenly, the surviving spouse is sitting on the same income inside half the tax shelter, with Medicare surcharges kicking in at half the previous threshold. I've seen this catch people completely off guard. Not because they were careless, but because the financial plan they built was technically correct for 2 people and structurally fragile for 1. The surviving spouse is often already dealing with the hardest stretch of their life. The grief, the paperwork, the decisions that can't wait, and layered on top of all of that is a tax bill that went up, a Medicare premium that went up, and a monthly income that went down. Fixed costs don't adjust for loss. Property tax stays the same, homeowners insurance stays the same. Utilities, maintenance, the car payment, none of it recalculates because the household shrank by one. This is the difference between a fragile path and a resilient one. The resilient path is built by people who saw this coming early enough to do something about it. They spent a few years before retirement converting pre-tax dollars into Roth accounts at lower tax rates. They structured their income so the surviving spouse wouldn't be pushed over the irmaa line by RMDs alone. They thought about the plan not just as a couple, but as two individuals who might eventually be navigating this alone. The difference between the two paths usually isn't income. It isn't even how much they saved. It's timing. The families who land in a resilient position almost always started making adjustments 4 to 6 years before retirement, while the tax levers were still available to pull. So let's bring this back to where you are right now. You're watching this video, which means you're probably somewhere between 50 and 65. You have a pension, you have a 401k, and you have a growing awareness that the standard advice doesn't quite fit. That's not a problem. That's a position most people would trade years of their career to be in. The complexity isn't a sign that something went wrong. It's a sign that you have more pieces on the board than the standard playbook was written for. The traps we talked about, the lump sum discount, the inflation erosion, the irmaa surcharge, the widow's tax cliff, none of them are inevitable. They're predictable, and predictable problems have solutions as long as you find them early enough. You found this early enough? Here's what you actually do with all of this. First, before you sign any lump sum paperwork, ask HR for the specific discount rate they used. Then look at your family health history. If your parents and grandparents lived into their late 80s, the monthly payout math usually wins by a wide margin. If your history is different, the calculus shifts. Second, rethink what your 401k is for. Your pension is already your bond allocation. You don't need to be as conservative as the textbooks say. Let that account run with more equity exposure so it can fight inflation for you. Third, start modeling Roth conversions now. Use the gap years between retirement and RMDs to move pre-tax dollars into a Roth IRA. Keep your MAGI under the irmaa thresholds. Pay a smaller tax bill today to eliminate a much larger one tomorrow. And fourth, run your numbers as a single person, even if you're married today. See what happens to your tax rate, your Medicare premium, and your net income if one spouse passes. That exercise alone will show you exactly how much Roth conversion work you need to do before it's too late. None of these moves require a finance degree. They require a clear view of your numbers and enough lead time to execute. 5 years is enough, but 5 years goes faster than it sounds. The families I've watched navigate this well aren't the ones with the biggest accounts or the highest incomes. They're the ones who understood their specific picture clearly and made a handful of deliberate moves before the deadlines closed. That's it. No exotic strategies, no market timing, just a clear view of the mechanics and enough lead time to act. That's exactly where you're sitting right now. So don't let the details overwhelm you into doing nothing. Pick the move that applies most directly to your situation. The lump sum question, the Roth conversion window, the portfolio reframe. Start there. One step taken now is worth more than a perfect plan that never gets off the ground. You've spent a career building this. Make sure the back half of the plan is as solid as the front half was. If this gave you a clearer way to think about your pension and your 401k together, hit the like button so more people in your situation can find this video. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you tomorrow with another deep dive into the mechanics of building real financial resilience.